Grab your popcorn, cozy up on the couch, and prepare to be entertained. We've scoured the internet far and wide to bring you the most side-splitting and facepalm-worthy moments that will leave you in stitches. Enjoy this week's compilation, and stay tuned for more fantastic content coming your way soon. Story 1. Not really applicable anymore, because he wasn't my son, but I was raising him at the time, and his mother and I have since broken up. Anyway, that morning we had been getting him ready for the day. Here comes the foreshadowing. My girlfriend casually mentions that since he was getting bigger, we should look at lowering the mattress in his crib. For non-parents, it seems that cribs have adjustable heights. Lower is safer, but harder to pick up the kid. I said I would see if I could get to it that day. Well, I didn't. Anyway, we are trying to get him to self-soothe. Overall, he was a good kiddo, but getting him to bed was often a nightmare, going in multiple times to calm his screaming. Well, we decided today that we would just let him cry it out, no matter how long it took. This kid would scream like he was being flayed alive if he felt he was alone too long, so we originally didn't think anything of it. It didn't sound any different than usual. We heard the screaming for probably around 40 minutes when my girlfriend finally caved. Now, she wasn't the calmest person in the world. Not abusive by any means, but like most people that have a child unexpectedly, he wasn't even remotely planned. She lost patience easily. So she finally got off the couch and stormed over to his bedroom and threw the door open right into his face, slamming him into the wall. He had managed to fall out of his crib, crawl to the door, and was screaming at the door. Now again, his screaming of this volume wasn't anything out of the ordinary, so no, we didn't notice it sounded any different than when he was in the crib. So now she panics, crying and screaming herself, and off to the ER we go. Hours later, he's fine, save a couple minor bruises. It took a few more months to get him to calm himself to sleep after that one, though. Parents here. I'd let a fussy kid cry up to 20 minutes. Past that, they're probably not going to stop. I remember seeing one of those nanny shows on TV where they were getting the parents to just put the kid to bed and then just let them soothe themselves no matter what. I don't know if it's good to be 20 minutes or just wean them off of it just cold turkey like that. What do you think? Story 2. That I almost wasn't his mom. I was 17 when I got pregnant. The father skipped town after he found out. By the time my parents found out, they pushed adoption on me hard. I didn't want to give him up at all, but my parents were very dead set on it, and I was afraid I wouldn't get any of their support if I decided to keep him. We met with adoption attorneys, met families, even picked one. My heart still wasn't in it, but I was terrified. This was all happening by the time I was around 35, 36 weeks. Average pregnancy is 40, so a month or so went by, and I gave birth. As soon as I held him, I knew I couldn't live another second without him. It was an instant connection. He felt mine, but I was still getting pressure from my parents. Eventually, during my hospital stay, my mom started coming around. She fell madly in love with him. My dad, however, tends to be fairly robotic in his emotions and was looking out for my best interest and was concerned about my quality of life being a young mom. By the time I was discharged, a decision still hadn't been made, so we had to send him to a house run by nuns who watched children that were in less than ideal situations. It was the most heartbreaking moment of my life. He was there for 2 days, and I felt completely empty without him. During that time, I made a life plan to show my parents and prove to them I had it all figured out. I had finally convinced them both that I could do this, so we picked him up from the house and brought him to his house. That was 5 years ago. As any other parent, I definitely don't have it all figured out like I thought I did, but I have a job, a college degree, a very supportive and loving partner, and an incredible 5-year-old little boy. I can't complain. Go you. Sounds like you have it under control. Usually these stories talk about the emotions of, bonding with this child, but that's amazing that this person had a plan put together to show that they wanted to move forward and do something with their lives. Really cool. That's the first time I've ever heard of it. Story 3. When my son was about 8 months old, we were living in Florida. It was January. Florida has huge palmetto bugs, giant flying frick-butt roaches that head indoors when the temperature drops. I should mention now that I have a pretty bad fear of them. We had been battling them for a couple weeks and had got them mostly under control by thoroughly checking the dogs when they came in from outside and putting out a couple motels around the house. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and my husband and I were watching the video baby monitor, commenting on how sweet our son was as he slept. Just having one of those special parenting moments. In a split second, there was a massive palmetto bug crawling all over his face. So my husband and I ran in the room, and I snatched the baby up so fast he woke up screaming as my husband straight up started closed fist punching this roach. It's funny as I type it, but I was holding my son and crying when this all was going down. Like the little sucker kept trying to get at my kid even once I picked him up. Also, a palmetto bug will chase whatever has a heat register when they're poisoned. During the same week, I was feeding my son, and one of these little pieces of junk came frantically rounding the corner of the other room into the living room, saw me and the kiddo, and took frickin' flight straight at us. So I grabbed my son and ran around the house as this thing chased us, screaming bloody unaliving while my baby ugly cried. Good times. So yeah, these are some things I won't be sharing with my son. Edit. Cockroaches, for Pete's sake. It's an American cockroach, not a palmetto bug. My bad. I guess that's what every Floridian I know calls them because it sounds less disgusting than dong roach. Now I know. When my 2-year-old son was 1, he grabbed a huge cockroach off the floor in our nasty first-floor New York City apartment and gently laid it on my sleeping head. I groggily thought he was giving me love pats, and until I felt it start throbbing in my curls, I screamed. He screamed. I picked legs and chunks of carapace out of my hair in the shower. I will never not tell him this story. I'm still stuck on the father just punching the cockroach like it's a cartoon. Like this cockroach just got up on his hind legs and put on a pair of boxing gloves and is doing like an old-timey boxing stance. Story 4. Should use a throwaway, but I think awareness is important, so here we are. I work with children as a professional. One day, I left my kid in the car. Accidentally. I was going through a bad divorce and we were low on food. Well, his daycare had called and I had to pick him up because he had a fever. It was a hot Texas summer and I grabbed him and his brothers and went to the food bank. They got out of the car on their own and I was thinking about finally being able to cook a meal and saw the boys I normally have and completely forgot about him. He was in the car about half an hour before I realized. My blood turned cold, and I thought he was gone. I rushed to the car and pulled him out. He was screaming, and you couldn't hear it outside the car. He was so warm, and I was so scared. I took him to the hospital, and he was fine, but I wasn't. I'm still not. I thought I unalived my kid, and everyone always said that kids unalive when the routine is broken and they're forgotten. It happened to me. When I share this story, I hear other parents who have done similar. The parents that do it aren't bad parents. It's usually stressed and forgetful parents. That's the day I decided that unless the kid was left on purpose, we shouldn't charge parents with a crime. The loss of your child and knowing it was your fault is punishment enough. Too long didn't read? I left my son in a hot car. He was okay, but I'll never forgive myself. I still cry over it. I'm crying while writing this post. You were on autopilot. We're all messed up. I mean, yours was a little more high risk, but we've all messed up like that. Story 1. I try to stay patient with people because I know folk can be an expert in something and a dunce in something else. I mean, hell, if you asked me about Warhammer figurines, I'd look like an idiot. But the amount of people who get hostile at me after asking and finding out that they can't take things like nursing, dental, anesthesia, etc. courses fully online sets my teeth on edge. I know that online labs exist, and a lot of programs are a combo of online or in person, but when someone is like, why? After I say, no, those generally aren't offered fully online, it takes all my restraint to answer. Because it generally requires in-person training, instead of, would you want to see a nurse who never physically learned how to draw blood for your lab testing, or that doesn't know how to operate a scale or a blood pressure cuff? Same with dental hygienists, etc. I don't want someone sticking one of those pointy hooks in my mouth if they've never physically touched someone else's mouth before. It's just common sense, or it should be. Caveat that I know a lot of BSN and MSN programs are online, but that's because those require someone already having their nursing license and associate's or nursing diploma, plus be working in the field already. It's the RN and other licensure programs that require the in-person component, because again, you need the physical training. There was a pretty popular game for a while, Surgeon Simulator. I don't know if you've ever played it, but you had to go in and do certain tasks, and you had the most slippery controls in the world. If you just took a look at someone playing that game, I think you would understand why you would want someone in those fields to have some in-person training. Story 2. I worked at Blockbuster Video in 2004 for 6 months. I had 3 unrelated incidents, but the words and tone of all 3 were uncannily identical. They answered the question immediately before asking it, and they still didn't know the answer. Yeah, I know my movie was late. Why do I have to pay a late fee? Because you're a dumb piece of poop that does not understand the logic of time. Those were the good old days. Now we're stuck with Redbox. I worked there during the no late fees era. If you kept a movie longer than 30 days, it would charge to your account as a sale. If you brought it back after that, you'd be refunded the sale price minus a $1.25, I think, restocking fee. Yeah, it's a fee for being late. Yes, it's disingenuous to charge the restocking fee while advertising no late fees. But you paid $5 and kept a new release for the entire 2 months it was popular, Karen. The store lost money because we couldn't rent that copy to anyone else while you had it, so shut up and pay your $1 or go complain to corporate. Just leave my $8 an hour butt out of it. As a fellow Blockbuster employee, I couldn't agree more with this statement. My years there vastly changed my view of average human intelligence. By the way, did you see on Netflix where they had a TV series about the last Blockbuster called Blockbuster? When Netflix was the one that had the business idea because they didn't want to pay late fees? That's kind of a bold move to do that to the business that you put out of business, don't you think? Story 3. Is the ice cream served cold? Usually as a waiter, I can game face almost anything, but there's no way my face didn't read, "The hell you just say?" I was out with friends once at a restaurant, and we asked the waiter how the rack of ribs was. He replied, "They are excellent," in a firm, confident tone. So I ordered them while my friend Mike decided on something else. We get the food. The ribs are great. I shared a rib with Mike. He loved it. But when the waiter comes back to ask how everything was, Mike, being a Mike, says this nonsense. "Well, I would have ordered the ribs if I'd known they were going to be that good." And the waiter looks at him bug-eyed and literally yelled, "I said they were excellent. What would have convinced you? Excellent plus? Was that the answer you needed?" We left that guy a damn good tip and have never let Mike forget it. Excellent plus. I guess what? Are they gonna blame the waiter for not being convincing enough with his words? Sounds like he delivered in a very confident tone. I guess Mike just needs a little bit more. I would hate to see what he's like after a date. What would convince you to go out again? Pretty plus? Story 4. It was our first day at school, and we were told to get paper and write our names on them so teachers would know our names. So the teacher called a person beside me by his name, and that person was surprised and was like, "How did he know my name?" I pointed at the paper, and he laughed just to cover up the awkwardness. I felt that. Edit. Whoa, man. This comment just blew up so fast, and this is my first time getting these amounts of points. Thank you so much. I never got used to wearing a name tag at my retail job. Occasionally, a customer would say my name when referring to me, and it would always make me run through a film roll of people I knew or once knew in my head, trying to figure out how I knew them before realizing, oh yeah, my name is literally on my vest. Story 5. Not asked to me, but by a buddy in the military. We will call him Tony, and we were in a pretty intense course in the military a few years ago. And Tony had a problem with asking our instructors a lot of cursing questions. And if they asked if anyone had questions, Tony had about 3 or 4 that could be easily answered by any one of us. This obviously ticked our instructors off to a point where one snapped, "Tony, why do you ask so many cursing stupid questions?" Tony smiled and replied, "So I don't do something cursing stupid, Sergeant." Everyone, including instructors, started laughing, minus the instructor who was legitimately ticked off with Tony. Deity damn, Tony, he got him good. The dumbest question was asked by the sergeant. "So I don't do something cursing stupid, Sergeant." A legendary response. He saw the opportunity and took it. Comedy gold. Story 6. Do you know who I am? Nope. Never met you before. I got that one time as a kid working in a grocery store. Woman wanted to cash a check for more than I even had access to. I told her I couldn't do it. When she asked, "Do you know who my husband is?" I seriously thought I should know, like maybe he was the owner or something. I looked at the check and sincerely replied, "No." She huffed off. Next day, I got fired. So I don't know who her husband was. I was working at Walgreens, and the Mr. Walgreen came in and paid at the register by check. Store policy required that I call the manager to approve all checks. So I called him. He freaked, but I figured this would be the worst time to break the rule. No consequences. I guessed correctly. Isn't Walgreens closing a whole bunch of stores in the U.S. right now? I guess, do you know who I am? Yes, Mr. Walgreen. Does that really mean that much now? Story 7. Where does the electricity go when you unplug something? Wouldn't it leak out of the socket into a puddle on the floor? Personally, I think that's a great question. From child to adult, a lot of people don't know much about electricity, conductors, or chemical energy storage. Heck, I bet half the people who think this is a stupid question couldn't properly explain why the question is stupid, aside from, electricity doesn't work like that. My degree is partially in electrical engineering, and I would even have a hard time explaining why this doesn't happen. Actually, thinking even more on it, it'd be kind of cool for outlets to be constantly sputtering little arcs. The hard part isn't explaining the phenomena, that's easy. It's just the underpinning physics. The hard part is explaining it so that other people can understand it. Story 8. When I was in the USMC, I was in LAR Light Armored Recon. We have LAVs, light armored vehicles, that are amphibious. So, yes, they are part boat. During a dog and pony show, I was asked this question. How deep can the water be for it to float? I thought he meant like at what point will it start to float versus drive. So I told him that the water needs to be around 4 feet for it to be used as water transport. No, he wanted to know if it would still float if the water was really deep. No, sir, what I mean is, if the water was like 100 feet deep, would it still float? I just stared at him like, really? This is the best one here, I think. Story 1. A design artist at a print shop I worked at 10 years ago, I'll call her Z, had always been one of those flaky but only just good enough to keep types. She'd create files that looked fine to customers and on screen, but required buttloads of pre-pressed de-buffoonery to make printable. Zero real technical skill, when it should have been half her job. One day, a little after lunch, a company-wide email from Z to her husband came through, where she described waiting with glee for the opportunity to purposely mess up a big repeat yearly job right before she planned to quit 8 months later. A lot of print jobs are on a yearly cycle with local businesses. This happened in February and referred to a $40,000 job that came around every October. As IT relief, I got called in to check what happened, and sure enough, Z's other emails sent on her workstation's email address to her husband described other stupid things she was planning, and referred to one of her husband's friends who worked for a rival print shop. So it was clear it was a bit of sabotage and probably upcoming poaching. Z was fired less than an hour after the email was sent. I didn't mention to my bosses that the email to all the staff was sent when I knew Z was out of the office, and had originally been sent before she went to lunch, and originally only to her husband. Our other designer, a quiet mouse type who could actually do the work, had seen the earlier sent emails at other times she needed to use Z's workstation, and pasted this completely revealing email into a new email to the whole company from Z's workstation. I just told her later in passing that I got her email about Z and gave her a thumbs up. I'm sure the schadenfreude was enough for them, but quiet mouse designer deserves more than a thumbs up. Yeah, I hope she gets a raise. I used to work on the pre-press side in a design department. So many designers came up with great designs, but they had no idea how to build a file mechanically so it would be ready to go through the print right away. It was astounding. Story 2. Working in the claims department for a huge insurance company, one time a claim handler sent out very personal customer information to the entire company. Every single employee, including the CEO, security staff, building staff, even cleaning staff. So that's bad enough. But then we have this other guy decide to reply all to that email, asking the other guy why he sent him this message, blissfully unaware that the first guy sent it to everyone in the company. So now the first guy responds, still unaware of what happened, telling the second guy he has no idea how that email went to him. So this thread goes back and forth, reply all, these two geniuses investigating what the hell happened for like 10 replies. They finally decided it was a computer glitch. I don't know how they still have jobs. I'd have fired them just for not knowing how reply all worked. As someone that works in a place that complies to HIPAA standards, holy hell. I'm surprised no one in management didn't freak the hell out. I am surprised that they have jobs as well. They still have jobs? This is sensitive data that they just leaked to a whole bunch of people. Did it get out to anyone outside of the company? Is that the only reason why they were able to keep their jobs? Story 3. When I was in college, I worked at a local ISP. One day, out of the blue, the lead sysadmin calls me. Hey, do you know how to break into a Cobalt rack? I need you to delete an email. Small hosting server. I could probably figure something out. Worst case, I can reboot it and reset the password. Poop. Hell. Never mind. That'll take too long. Click. A bit confused. I just shrugged and went on with my day. Later, I found out the reason for the strange phone call. The customer had been emailing back and forth with a sysadmin and the company owner regarding some technical issue that led to a billing dispute. The sysadmin, having a very short temper, hit reply all without thinking and wrote something along the lines of, just because customer likes to take it up the butt doesn't mean we need to bend over and let him do whatever he wants. He called me to break into the server so that I could delete the email before the customer had a chance to read it. Unfortunately, the customer got the email immediately and received a lot of free hosting services. Tales from tech support. Yep, no matter what, you need to be polite in your communications because you never know when you're going to hit reply all by accident. This is just... I know he has a short temper, but dude, learn constraint. Person, learn constraint. Story 4. We had this guy from the main office, Pete, who would come up from time to time. He is an arrogant butthole. I decided that I couldn't stand that smug jerk within literally 30 seconds of meeting him. Anyway, we had had quite a bit of turnover in our department since Pete's last visit, so our boss wanted to schedule a lunch so he could meet everyone. So, his admin sent out a mass email to see who might be interested in lunch on Thursday. I replied back that I wouldn't be coming because I had a conflict, and then I added, "Plus, Pete's kind of a jerkwad." I hadn't realized that I had hit reply all until I heard the scattered laughter all over our floor. Our boss came over, invited me into a conference room and said, "I'd appreciate it if in the future you'd let everyone decide on their own whether or not Pete is a jerkwad." Thankfully, Pete wasn't on the email. I absolutely lost it. This post honestly made my day. Thank you. Story 5. I used to work at a law firm, and one day an email went out to everyone, about 40 people, that was about a specific case and had very little relevance to my job position, so I ignored it. A few minutes later, I got another email from a different attorney with a snarky response. Well, an argument started between these two attorneys, still replying all to the office, and after about 6 or so emails, a third attorney wrote, "Yeah, well, my dad can beat up your dad. By the way, you've been sending this to the whole office." At my firm, about 50 employees, there's a partner that used to reply to all the conflict checks and other emails that are sent to all employees with "X City says hello," right up until the day when another partner replied all with, "No one gives a care where you are today, Bob. Stop being such an attention hussy." Well, if someone's on their way out, I guess the person gets away with calling them an idiot like that, but they shouldn't. It's just still common courtesy. Maybe you're just not happy with that person and they're on their way up for incompetency. But still, you're applying to everybody. Unless you want everybody to know, just keep it to yourself. Story 6. I work at a public institution. We send out term schedules to departments so chairs, deans, and administrative assistants can review and make necessary changes. We had a chair reply back once the following: "I've made some changes to the schedule. Can you rerun the report and send it to me for my idiot former secretary?" This is with the dean, chairs of the other departments in that academic college, and administrative assistants of that academic college all copied in, including the idiot. Apparently, she was on her way to being terminated for some reason. She was gone pretty soon afterward. We never heard back from anybody else in that department either, so I'm not sure what happened. The chair that sent the email remained at the university until he ended up passing away from something unexpectedly a few years ago. It was idiot. Story 7. Our company uses an IM service that's divided into rooms for each department as well as individual chats. We had a temp one year who flew through her work but did it poorly. She completed something like 24 tasks when the average temp did 5 or 6, but I'd have to stay late and waste time fixing them. It was too far into our busy season to do anything else. So one night, I messaged my coworker like, "Ugh, she did like 25 things again, now I get to fix them." And she goes, "Hell." And then a third person goes, "That sucks." And I realized I'd sent the message to our entire department, including the aforementioned temp. First time I ever made a coworker cry. It was so bad. I made up some excuse that we both knew was hogwash, and I still cringe thinking about it. If she was that upset, it's really the company's, don't know who was over her exactly, fault for not giving a little constructive feedback. Sounds like she had a skewed understanding of the expectations. Story 1. This will get buried, but the man my mom has been with for the last 20-plus years is a real piece of work. Highlight reel. He's so far behind on child support, he hasn't worked an over-the-table job in 20 years, so his wages won't be garnished. He's cheated on her multiple times and made it her fault. He's a raging alcoholic who used to hide his booze in my toy box. One time, he was staying with my mom's friend who had a bunch of expensive wine she gifted out. My mom got a bottle and went to drink it, only to realize it was watered-down soy sauce. He drank every single bottle and replaced them with various liquids to look full, replaced the corks and sealed the bottles. One time, the cops came to arrest him. I can't remember if it was related to a DUI or not paying child support, and he ran off. Turns out he was living in our neighbor's woodshed for a week. My mom rented his mom's house that he used to rent. When we moved in, he took the master bedroom and told my mom she could have the guest bedroom. Did the same thing a few years later with another property she rented. He used to groom us as children, and I only realized this recently. It's kind of messed up, to be honest, that at 30 years old I just now realized how bad it was. On weekends, me and his 3 daughters, had to be in bed by 8 p.m., or he would turn the light out, light candles, and we could massage him naked for literally hours. Of course, as young kids, 5 to 10 years, we didn't want to go to bed early, so we did it. He would praise us for how good we were and encourage the behavior. It became normal, so it was just the Friday, Saturday night thing we did at my mom's house. He also used to objectify everything, including our haircuts, would comment how good the cut looked, followed by an and the cartoons we watched. A few years ago, when I was 27, he sent me multiple intimately explicit messages on Facebook. I thought I was misreading them because he's known me since I was 7, so surely it was a mistake. I showed them to my boyfriend, who didn't even hesitate to tell me he was testing the waters. He was right. His youngest daughter recently got married. He was explicitly not invited to the wedding, showed up anyway, took someone else's place setting, cut in line for food, and had the audacity to complain that his barbecue was better. He also had the gall to apologize to me for how he treated my mom. I had cut my mom out about a year prior, and she thought he was the reason because surely her narcissistic behavior couldn't be it. So she made him apologize to try and get me to talk to her again. I told him I have nothing to say to him, and his daughter's wedding that he wasn't invited to was not the place for any conversation. If he terminated tomorrow, the world would be a better place. Man, that is a roller coaster of a first story. Doesn't sound like she has any love for her mother and her behavior either. I was wondering why she didn't even try to step in now for the way this guy was treating the mom, but sounds like they're both kind of garbage people. But I guess that's the way it is on this story. Story 2. My mom dated this one guy for 5+ years. She was already a bad parent, but with him, she acted like we didn't exist. They would argue and have intimacy like till 1 a.m. most nights, so I would go to school very tired. He didn't even acknowledge us, and she didn't care. The only time he did, he would snitch on me for small things. The few times she was home, they had her door locked, and sometimes I would try to talk to her because I was being bullied, and she didn't find out till years later. And at the time, I had been coping with never seeing my dad, and the door was locked, so I just go off and cry. I confronted her about it once, and she said he was the one who locked the door, but like still shrew, I'm your kid. He was also cheating on her, and he pretty much beat her one day, and she made me call the police. They broke up again after that. That all happened like 2 years ago. This was all while I was like a pre-teen and up, and I was actually trying to bond with my mom. I still don't really have a connection with her because of him and don't love her. He still comes over to her house and spends the night. Also, he used to live off of her. He's never had a real job. Everyone sees him as a saint, and I still get questioned as to why I don't like him. Everyone was mad at me when I was 14 because he came over to my mom's house months after he beat her. He said hi to me, and I said, ew. My mom was a jerk. I now tell her to her face she's bad at picking men and that she's never going to be happy if she keeps picking homeless, abusive men. She's still in love with him, according to her. I'm so sorry you had to put up with that as a child. She really should have been there to support you. I hope you can escape from there as soon as possible. Looks like we've got a pattern going on over here. No love for the moms. Apparently, they are very bad or abusive mothers to begin with. The guys either don't acknowledge the kids or objectify them, don't hold down jobs, and just sponge off of the moms for all this. Let's see if that pattern continues. Story 3. My parents aren't the best people in the world. Looking at my old comments and posts, you can kind of get why. My mom especially has a horrible history with men. Most of them end up in jail, have been in jail, or are absolutely crazy. The previous one had to be the craziest person I've ever met. In the beginning, he was obviously using my mom for money and food. They were constantly going out, and he kept manipulating her that he was madly in love. They eventually moved into our house after dating for only 2 months. The first time I met him was actually him waking up in the morning and I was on the way out to school. Months and months later, my mom was about to break up with him as he had no job, the entire relationship, and was contributing nothing for our family. They break up, and that's when his true side comes out. He stopped taking all medications, so he became manic from bipolar, stopped eating altogether, and stalked every move my mom did. My mom, being an idiot, read that as a sign of love and got back together with him. They moved in, and the same stuff happened again. This time, he threatened her life and attempted to unalive her in a Salvation Army with his pocket knife. Police were called and charges were pressed by the store and my mother. He went to jail for 90 days and my mom has a restraining order against him. You'd think that would stop everything, but it didn't. My mom and him got together one last time. Everything seems to go great, but my mom and her ex were in therapy separately to deal with their problems. He has a job and everything. All of a sudden, he stops taking his meds and goes manic again. My mom kicked him out that night and blocked every single way of contact. He's stalked again and threatened to unalive her. It's been 3 months and he's in jail now, hoping it stays that way. This one, it looks like there's a possible light at the end of the tunnel, but it just follows the same patterns of the first 2 stories. I really want this one to be where she turns her life around and just completely ends this cycle. I really hope that's it. Story 4. We'll call him Jose. Younger than my mom, chronically unemployed, a drinker, violent, and literally illiterate, but good-looking, so my mom was smitten. My mom was from a good, in name, family. She had education, she had 2 little daughters. And she brought this scumbag to our peaceful little apartment, and he settled in right away, beating the hell out of all of us, impregnating my mom 4 times, running off for months, coming back, never paying child support. When he was around, he mercilessly beat on us, and my mom just stood by like a freaking jerk, not intervening. One morning, my little brother, who was maybe 2, woke up and was hopping up and down in his crib for attention. Jose, a grown man, smacked that poor baby so hard in the face that the baby flew across the crib and hit the other side and slid down. Finally, my mom got diagnosed with lupus, and Jose found out and literally abandoned her at the pharmacy. Years later, we found out that he had been intimately abusing my older sister. I am still so mad at my mom for the decade of bullscat we endured with that man. He was literally a cancer, and she couldn't summon the self-esteem to leave him, even when he was beating us with extension cords. There's a poem by Nayara Waheed called "Before You Get That Key Made" that should be handed to every single mother. Forget your loneliness. Protect your kids. 1. I'm so sorry you endured this. 2. I wanted to high-five you through the screen about that last sentence of yours. Forget your loneliness. Protect your kids. This isn't talked about enough because so many people endure horrible things when dating and having children. Story 1. My mom's DNA test came back with interesting results. So my grandparents' families both immigrated from Poland during World War II. We don't know much about our families' lives in Poland other than a significant number of them expired, and there are Roma roots on my grandpa's side. They settled in Philadelphia in a poor, mostly Polish neighborhood. Grandma and Grandpa had a rough marriage, but due to religion and appearances, never divorced. No one in the family remembers Grandma being pregnant, nor are there any pictures of her pregnancy or of my mom as a newborn. Additionally, Mom looks like no one in the family. She's got olive skin and dark, thick, curly hair, whereas everyone else is light-skinned with straight, light, medium hair. She also has blue eyes, whereas both grandparents had brown. My mom, my sister, and I have theorized that either 1. Grandma adopted her because she wanted a kid but didn't want to have intimacy with her husband. 2. Grandpa knocked up someone else and Grandma took the baby. We lean towards the latter because there have been some physical traits and medical conditions that my mom and us kids seemingly inherited from Grandpa. So a few years ago, Mom decides to do one of those DNA ancestry tests. Her main reason was to explore the Roma roots, thinking that her results would come back mostly Polish and Eastern European. We joked about the stolen baby thing, but didn't think it would show anything to support that, even if it was true. Her results came back, and they were very Baltic and Middle Eastern. No Polish whatsoever. We were shocked. Mom chalked it up to the test not being super reliable. We haven't seriously discussed the results and the implications they might present. Mom has said she'd rather never know if she's biologically her mother's daughter. They don't have a great relationship, so I think it would create more turmoil either way. Personally, I'm convinced the truth is that Grandpa got someone else in the neighborhood pregnant, and Grandma took the baby both to hide the scandal and so she could have a kid. I definitely think there could have been other families with similar backgrounds to my grandfather's, especially during the time of World War II when many refugees were escaping to the U.S. and lying about their background out of fear. Too long didn't read? Mom, daughter of Polish immigrants, took DNA tests to explore Roma roots. Results came back heavily Baltic Middle Eastern and support family theory that Mom was a stolen baby. That is heavy. I don't think she wanted to really face the results of this test, even though she wanted to take it. I think there was some curiosity she had about it, but I don't think she wanted to take it any further. She wanted to know, but she didn't want to act on it. What do you think? Story 2. Found out that my brother is only my half-brother. Our parents, well, who we thought were both our parents, were never married. But our mom has insisted my whole life that my dad is my brother's dad. He never acknowledged my brother, he did me, claiming that the man my mom was living with at the time was probably his father. My mom has always said the other fellow was simply her roommate. Given that my dad was an alcoholic and chronic liar, and our mom has never been someone to lie to make herself look better, and that my brother looked pretty much exactly like my dad in an old army photo, we believed our mom. So my brother gets an ancestry DNA test done, and he's got no German ancestry at all, even though our dad's side of the family is super German. But, things happen. DNA comes out weird. Then I got a test done, and he showed up as a close match, but with 99% certainty a half-sibling. So we dig into this a little more, and my half-sister from my dad's side son shows up on mine, but not his. She's there too now, only on mine. All the cousins on my dad's side show up on mine, but not his. The relatives we have in common are our mom's family. So we're left with the certainty that our mom has been wrong all these years. Again, I swear to you that this woman does not lie to make herself look better. It just doesn't occur to her. I mean, I was in elementary school when she told me I was the result of a drunken attempt to get her ex-boyfriend to leave his wife for her. This woman is really a lot more honest than she should be by all rights. So we've actually decided not to raise the issue with her. Either she's gone 50 years not knowing the actual father of her oldest child, or there's enough trauma there to make an unusually honest woman lie. This is just one more small bit of weirdness in our family anyway. My brother's legally my uncle. This is one of those stories where as I'm reading it, I'm trying to create the organizational chart in my mind and it's just not clicking. Did any of this really click in there for you? I may have to go back and read this later to be sure. Anyway, story 3. So I live in a very small town, and when I was about 9 or so, I went to my friend's birthday party. This girl hung out with another group of girls, so I didn't know everyone there too well. I'm not sure how we got on the topic, but one of the girls told me her dad's name was Steve, and she wasn't allowed to talk to him. And I was like, that's weird. I have a cousin named Steve, and you kind of look like his son a bit. I asked my mom to send a picture of Steve, and the girl said it was her dad. Obviously, I didn't understand very well, but I told my mom that Steve was my new friend's dad. She told me not to say anything about it. Well, Steve had been married for many years at this point and had 2 sons only a few years younger than me. So for Steve to be my friend's dad, that meant that he would have had to have cheated on his wife. I didn't think about this for many years, and we all sort of blew it off. I never really hung out with this new friend again, and she grew up to have a very difficult life. I know her family struggled financially, and her mom was out partying, it seemed. The poor girl was even found in a corn video that ended up circulating in the town. Meanwhile, Steve is living in a very nice large house. His kids have everything they need, and he is living the life. So I do 23andMe, and the friend is a suggested match as my cousin. I sent her the connection request, and I'm waiting for her to accept it. I'm not really sure if I should mention it to Steve or what. I told my parents only. I just feel so horrible that had Steve stepped up and fathered this girl as he did his other children, her life could have been drastically different. Or at the very least, paid her mother child support. I don't think that this situation is I just don't believe this situation. And thanks to all these DNA tests, this is kind of a fairly new predicament to track down who exactly has fathered who, or who is the son or the daughter of who. A long time ago, this would have been something that would have just been he said, she said, and I think we all know how a lot of that would usually go. Unfortunately. Story 4. My sister did one through 23andMe maybe 3 or 4 years ago and discovered we had a cousin. His profile was public because he had been adopted and was hoping to reconnect with his birth family. We were able to figure out that he would have belonged to my dad's sister. My sister wasn't sure how to bring it up with her, so she asked my dad if he could talk to his sister about it. But he dragged his feet a bunch, so my sister eventually had to let her know. It turns out she got pregnant in college back in the 60s, and the father bailed, so she went to stay with a friend across the country, had the baby, and put him up for adoption. She ended up telling her parents years later, and they were like, "Oh, okay, thanks for telling us," and never brought it up again because they're extremely repressed. She had also told her husband prior to their marriage, and when the kids were teenagers, they'd been filled in as well, so it wasn't a huge family secret. It was just one the extended family didn't really know about. Anyway, my sister put our new cousin and our aunt in touch. He had done the DNA test hoping to learn more about his medical history, but also because he wanted to let his birth parents know that they made a great decision And he had an amazing adoptive family and had had a really happy life and had no bad feelings towards them. That was a huge relief for my aunt, because she had always worried about that. I haven't met him in person yet, but several of my family members have, including my dad. My aunt and dad and grandma have all become close to his adoptive parents too, as well as our cousin's wife and kids. His birthday was actually day before yesterday. I'm Facebook friends with him and saw it there.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.